Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to our niche cast on the 14th of December. We'll make this our second to last niche cast of the year. We'll do one early next week, then we'll take a break for the festive season, and we will also be delivering our subscriber podcast for the Patreon and Substack whānau after this. So we will record this podcast and then we'll just crack into an extended recording session to record our subscriber podcast, and we'll hopefully have another subscriber podcast next week as well. So big up all the Patreon whānau and those supporting us directly through Substack. On our agenda today for the subscriber podcast, we do have a deeper dive into domestic cricket. Ford Trophy is finished, then we move into Super Smash mode. And we'll also cover some of the flying Kiwis that we don't touch on later in this episode of the Niche Cast. Obviously, we're from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. Got lots and lots and lots of cricket. Got Blackcaps, Test and ODI yarns on the website. Got Ford Trophy yarns on the website. Got a White Ferns yarn on the website. Also got flying Kiwis is in a zone right now. We've got the, you did manage to squeeze out your Wellington Phoenix.
Got there, yeah, I got there.
Jan, what's the summary? What's the, like a 1 minute summary of that Wellington Phoenix piece that you've got on our website, the niche-case.com?
Well, I suspect if we talk Phoenix later on, some of the sort of more specific ideas might come back around. So the 1 minute summary for a nice little taster, read the article as you listen to the podcast, would be that I don't even think it needs to be a 1 minute summary. I think it's a one sentence summary, which is that the Wellington Phoenix, with basically the same players and as last season, and replacing the guys who left, of which there was at least 3 locked on starters, possibly as many as 7 locked on starters who have departed, depending on how you want to view things. Only replacing them with backups from other clubs or predominantly academy players. Despite that, the Wellington Phoenix have been a lot better to start this season than they were finishing off last season. And the reason for that is because they are a more efficient team. They're just finding ways to play to the strengths of their players rather than to the idea of the system that it's sort of, after 4 years of Tele being around, you sort of had an idea of how they were playing, right? And Italiano's shaken that up because I think it got to the point where some of those things weren't necessarily fitting the players that they had. And so we might talk about a couple of those specifics later on, but they are until the Newcastle game on the weekend, which was weird because it was almost like watching them last season again. Like, this is the way they finished off last term, because the things they were doing wrong were the things they've been doing right for throughout this season. But we'll write that one off as a dud until we get more evidence that it wasn't, which I think probably we're more likely in dud territory than not. And say through the first 6 games before that, very efficient Wellington Phoenix team. Just players playing closer to their potentials than they had been beforehand.
You still managed to go over the minute there with your description.
Yeah, I know. I gave it the 1 minute summary, and then I gave it the 1 sentence summary, and then I gave it the 1 minute sub summary. I don't know what the word should be. That
you went from the niche cast into the subscriber podcast there with your extended,
yeah, that's the one
with your extended summary, but it's all good. So we'll chat about the Wellington Phoenix. We got 2 Wellington Phoenix games coming up this weekend, and I do love this period of sport where the games just pop up on random days. You have Super Smash on the telly most days. It's going to be fantastic. Love this time of year for Aotearoa sporting matters. If you do love the niche case, if you do appreciate our work, you can sign up and donate through Patreon or a paid Substack subscription to access the subscriber podcast, which is a bonus podcast every week. You can also make a one-off donation through Buy Me a Coffee, and we've had a few of those come through recently. So big up to everyone who's supported us through Buy Me a Coffee. And of course, if you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe on YouTube so we can get our numbers up on YouTube. Otherwise, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make yourself heard as well so we know how people are absorbing the niche cast, Aotearoa's greatest sporting podcast, probably the only podcast doing this type of stuff. So shout out to me and you. We try. Let's get a bit of mindfulness.
Yeah, righto. Where are we with this? This is a quote from a Middle Ages Celtic poet whose name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. So apologies for that. Apologies to the ancestry for that one. Um, Quote goes, "The proud man's arrow swiftly brings pain."
The proud man's arrow swiftly brings pain. Like he shoots the arrow.
I think you could read it both ways. I think you could say that the arrow brings pain to himself, and it could bring pain to others as well. And you think about how people act when they're acting from a place of pride, which is also a place of ego. Like, let's be honest about what that represents. I think you find people who damage themselves by being overly proud, and I think that's quite an obvious one when you're thinking in the realms of mindfulness, is the ways in which we're trying to not do damage with our pride to ourselves, just making bad decisions or whatever. But I think it's also probably a good thing to pay attention to the ways in which you might hurt other people by lashing out or that kind of thing for the same reason, to protect yourself and some kind of self-defense, retaliation, which from a place where the self doesn't need defense. It's just coming from insecurity.
Boom. I love it. Nice work. Good mindfulness. I'll congratulate you on that mindfulness. You've been out of form for a couple of weeks. You've been nicking them off to slips. You've been missing a few straight ones, hit a few to the fielders, not finding gaps, not rotating the strike, but right now you're in form. So big up to you. One thing that I will be writing about in our newsletter via Substack, we do a Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, which is completely free. You just need to sign up, and then you can upgrade that to a paid subscription to access the subscriber podcast along with the Patreon whānau. One thing that's top of mind right now in the rugby league realms is all this chatter about rugby union players going to rugby league. There's been talk of some sort of salary cap dispensation for signing rugby union players, and we've also had more recent news of Caleb Clark training with the Rabbitohs. He's just training with the Rabbitohs, so nothing crazy happening there. But you also had Solomon Alaimalo sign with the Tigers, and that had been on the cards for a few weeks. Lots of rumors around that one. So he has basically left Super Rugby, NPC Rugby, to go join the Tigers. The Tigers do have a decent record of signing players from rugby union, none of whom have really kicked on. Like, I think last season, they had Tristan Riley, who was, I think, a centre from rugby union. I don't even know if he's with the Tigers anymore. So we'll see how Solomon Alaimalo goes with the Tigers. And this had me thinking, because obviously there's a lot of that kind of headline-y news about rugby union players and rugby league, and there's always a competitive battle. Of obviously our stance has always been that of abundance. Aotearoa has footy abundance. We've got plenty of players in both codes who are extremely talented, and there's none of this old school battle between the codes. It's just there's a lot of talent and it's all good. Both have filled their stocks. But what I am here to share with you today, and what I'll write about tomorrow in our newsletter, is that this is far deeper than the kind of headline-y top of kind of the surface level stuff that you'll see in the media. And I've got a few different ways to paint this picture. So Alaimalo, I've found a few photos of him at Tigers training, and he was, some of the photos, he was right there with Oliver Lowry. So Oliver Lowry, I've had this idea as well about players from Canterbury, and Oliver Lowry is one of those. He also played first 15 rugby in Christchurch. So he is a league junior, but him and Solomon Alaimalo both played first 15 rugby in Christchurch. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. So you've got two basically Kiwi NRL players, with Alaimalo joining the Kiwi NRL mixer. I don't know if he's Samoan or Tongan, but I imagine he'll put himself into the Samoan or Tongan equation. You've got two of their Kiwi NRL lads. They play first 15 rugby. And I am deep into the Warriors junior ranks. Like, I love all these Warriors juniors. They're all fantastic players. And most of them played first 15 rugby. So you've got Ali Leotawa, first 15 at King's College. Dimitri Sifikula, first 15 at De La Salle College. And you also had, let me go down the ranks. Zion Mai'u'u, first 15 at Kelston Boys High School. Jacob Laban moved from Wellington to Auckland, and he ended up playing first 15 for Kelston Boys High School. Leka Halasima, Selu Miela Halasima, otherwise known as Leka Halasima, one of the best rugby league prospects in the world. He was playing first 15 for Southern Cross Campus. Tanner Stowers Smith, young prop for the Warriors. He was playing first 15. I think he was at St. Bede's College in Christchurch. Ituati Fukafuka, hooker for the Warriors. He came over from St. Peter's first 15, where he was a halfback for their college team. And in that first 15 team for St. Peter's College, you had Presley Siumanu Tingafua, who was a midfielder for St. Peter's College playing first 15. You've also got Eddie Iramia, who I've spotted in a few training pictures for the Warriors. He was first 15 at De La Salle College. So most, like the majority of New Zealand Warriors juniors played first 15 rugby. The majority. Most of them. Many of them also played rugby league. And you can add to it C.O. Kelly. He went to St. Paul's College, which is a rugby league school, but he was also playing first 15. So guys like C.O. Kelly, Ituati Fukafuka, Leka Halasima, they were all cracking representative teams in rugby union while they were playing rugby league. But this is to say, the majority of New Zealand Warriors juniors played first 15 rugby union. Then we have the also recent update of Kailis Putoko and Tavita Nofahu entering NRL systems months after representing New Zealand schools rugby union team. So they were in the best schoolboys rugby union team from New Zealand. The New Zealand representative first 15 team, basically. Kailis Putoko out of, I think he was at Hamilton Boys High School, and Tavita Nofahu at St. Kitts. We talked about Tavita Nofahu when the train and trial thing came out, because he got a train and trial deal with the Dolphins, and Kailis Putoko has joined the Gold Coast Titans. And I talked about that a few weeks ago with how that doesn't usually happen, because usually New Zealand Rugby Union, they overlook players who have already got links to NRL teams. So someone like Matthew Tomoko, who was already affiliated with the Raiders, he didn't crack any rep teams, even though he was an absolute monster for Auckland Grammar, first 15. Matthew Tomoko played first 15. Leo Thompson played first 15. So in a variety of different ways, most of the Kiwi NRL lads, or a lot of the Kiwi NRL lads, have rugby union backgrounds in first 15 rugby. So if that's happening, if that's like the undercurrent, if that's the foundation of how this kind of battle between rugby league and rugby union sits, what's happening at the top level doesn't really matter. NRL's always had better pathways. So someone like Putoko, Tavita Nofahu, those type of lads, they can get into a decent contract straight away out of high school, whereas the rugby union pathway is a bit slower. You need to battle away for a few years, and like someone like Xavier Tito Harris, who was a fantastic dual code junior rugby league and rugby union, he's one of the exceptions, because you might have some sevens opportunities, and then you might play a bit of NPC, but it's going to take you a few years to crack the Super Rugby ranks. When you can, like the baseline kind of fringe NRL contract is going to be more than an NPC contract. It's probably going to be more than a fringe New Zealand Sevens contract. So there's a lot of like surface level headline stuff happening, but a lot of the Kiwi NRL talent plays rugby union. some as well as rugby league. Some have moved over from rugby union to rugby league. But guys like Kailas Putoko and Tavita Nofahu, who were in the best schoolboy team from New Zealand this year, their moves to rugby league don't get any headlines. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Like, this is what's happening below the surface level, and I find it interesting. Like, it's not necessarily saying that rugby league is far superior to rugby union because they're getting all these players. This is just the landscape. Many kids are playing both codes, and many kids are moving towards rugby league because of better opportunities. I'm not sure what it means. I'm not sure what it says. But this is the stuff happening below the surface. When you see headlines like Super Rugby star Solomon Alamalu joining West Tigers, or Newcastle Knights recruiting Tyrone Thompson, the twin brother of Leo Thompson, which seems like it's going to happen as well. All Black Caleb Clark training with the Rabbitohs. What's going on? Well, all these NRL teams have first 15 talent from New Zealand in their systems already, and many of the best rugby league juniors also played first 15 rugby.
Yeah, and I highly, highly suspect, probably not even suspect, I think we basically know this, that the players themselves don't really see a competition between the two sports. Like, it's not a thing of I'm a union loyal, therefore I have to stick with this one and try and make the All Blacks someday, or no, it's legal day. I'm going over the NRL. There's more money in it, blah blah blah, whatever. It's just as simple as, like, what opportunity comes along that is better and open to doing both, and probably in most of these cases good enough to do both. I think most of the guys you've mentioned to have gone from first 15 to like NRL systems, it's not so much that it's not that they couldn't have made it as union players either. It's like, which they're probably good enough athletes, and the codes are similar enough as to use an overused word. I'm ashamed of myself for saying codes, but there we go. That you could, whichever one you put your attention to and dedicate yourself towards, some of these guys would probably succeed at either, frankly. And it's just a matter of which opportunity comes along at the right time. It's not, I'm pretty confident those guys don't see it as the competition between sports that perhaps it's portrayed as sometimes through the media, or, in your and having a beer at the local club rooms or whatever. I don't think that battle is actually playing itself out amongst the players.
I would agree with that. We will be moving into one-day cricket mode with the Blackcaps for their series against Bangladesh. Bangladesh are now coming to Aotearoa. I think they've got a tour game today against the New Zealand 11. For anyone curious about the New Zealand 11, it's basically players who aren't playing for a trophy, who won't be playing Super Smash. So it's not like a New Zealand A mix at all. It's just who's available to play cricket on Thursday in Lincoln against the touring Bangladesh team. And then we go ODI mode Sunday, and then we'll record early next week, and then we'll have Wednesday and Saturday games before a T20 series as well. Obviously, we've seen that Will O'Rourke, Josh Clarkson, and Aditya Ashok are in the Blackcaps ODI squad. Ashok will replace Ish Sodhi. Sodhi's only playing the first game. Ashok will play the second and third game. And then it's a fairly steady ODI team. Latham, Ashok, Allen, Blundell, Chapman, Clarkson, Duffy, Jamison, Milne, Nichols, O'Rourke, Ravindra Sodhi, and Will Young. What I am going to say in the subscriber podcast when we go deep into domestic cricket is that Josh Clarkson's earned his ODI call-up, but he might not even be the best all-rounder for CD. Because I don't think he's better than Doug Bracewell, but Doug Bracewell hasn't played a lot this season, and especially recently. But I also think Will Clark is a tremendous young all-rounder who's taken wickets, he's scoring runs, he is in fantastic form for CD, and he's playing better cricket than Josh Clarkson. So if you're getting a bit of buzz about Josh Clarkson, really powerful hitter who did help Central Districts win Plunkett Shield and Ford Trophy last season, you may also be curious to note that Will Clark might be better than Josh Clarkson right now. Of course, Clarkson's been on the scene for a while, much longer, and he deserves this opportunity. But I do want to highlight that Will Clark is awesome. Maybe better than Clarkson right now. We've talked a lot about Will O'Rourke and his skill set. Ashok's already played T20s for the Blackcaps, I believe. He might have played one game. And I think I wrote in my preview that the Blackcaps have used 28 ODI players this year, which Dean Foxcroft has played one game, but he's not in this squad. And then you've got the 3 new players. So again, we're hitting that 30 player mark that we talk about with the Blackcaps and these other sports. What stands out for you about the 3 young players before we digest the rest of the squad and who's in form, who's not in form?
Well, do you have the ages of the 3 of them? Because O'Rourke and Ashok are a little bit younger than Clarkson. Am I right? Like Clarkson would be 26, 27.
20,
yeah. And the other 2 would be earlier 20s, Ashok especially.
22, 23, yeah.
Which is interesting because when the squad was named, we talked about this, and this was one of the angles. It's like this opportunity comes around because other guys are missing. So it is a case of like a little bit of just being in the right place at the right time. And Clarkson definitely, I don't know, I'm curious to see how he looks because in a way he feels like a bit of an all-rounder that the Blackcaps would have picked and who would have played 100 ODIs 20 years ago. He sort of feels like that type of player, hard hitting, sort of slightly above medium pace, good solid player who probably isn't going to bat in the top 5 and probably isn't going to ever open the bowling kind of thing. And I don't know, maybe it's just the time of the year. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic to see that type of player in the Blackcaps again. But he has he's earned his shot with some much more consistent style. He had a really good end to the last I think Plunkett Shield season actually, and then he sort of has been able to sustain that a bit into this season, which is how you get around. You lay down a platform of solid, consistent performances over a time, and then you step that up a little bit, and people take notice. And the other 2 feel like selections, though they're a little bit different, where it's like they've been doing some nice stuff domestically, but it's also like the way that Rach and Ravindra, for example, got into the Blackcaps first, where it was also a bit of, we see some potential for something, pretty valuable here, and we want to sort of nurture that by giving easing these guys into the national team setup. So I don't know. I hope we see a bit of all 3 of them over the series against Bangladesh, because I don't know that it's really a series that has a lot else going on. I don't think they're doing that the Super League thing anymore. It's just kind of a bilateral series. So, and we normally win these kind of games against Bangladesh. So I would like to see them mix it up a little bit. We'll see how it goes. But back into ODI mode, eh? We had a whole World Cup cycle, months of ODI stuff. Brief little test tour, and now back into ODI mode for at least a week. Then some 2020s. We haven't played 2020s in a long time. Kane Williamson hasn't played a 2020 this year, which tells you a little bit about the focus on T20s in 2023.
Yeah, it's not a series that I'm going to be like constantly analyzing. I'll do a lot of these like whiteboard series. I'll just pop up to offer the really basic preview notes that folks need to know, like who's in form, who's out of form, who's doing what in domestic cricket, like add the whole context around it. But I'm not going to be hanging by performances and results, because it's just like there's a lot of these random series where you're like, oh yeah, cool, fun, entertaining cricket, but it doesn't really mean much else. As far as players who are in and out of form, this is a really curious series for Jacob Duffy, because you've got the selection of Will O'Rourke, And Jacob Duffy has 2 wickets at an average of 82, 6 RPO this year in Ford Trophy. So just Ford Trophy. He did take 3 wickets in his 1 ODI appearance this year. He also conceded 10 RPOs, so he's the most expensive ODI bowler for the Blackcaps this year. So shout out to him. So it's going to be a really interesting series for him, as I said, because you've got Will O'Rourke right there hunting his opportunity. Jamieson hasn't taken many ODI wickets this year. He's got 3 wickets at an average of 71. He's played 5 ODIs. He's bowled in 4. One bowler who is in great form is Adam Milne, but again, he's only played 4 ODIs this year, but then he's got 9 wickets and an average of 20 in ODIs this year. He's also the best bowler in Ford Trophy as he's got 9 wickets along with Christian Clark and Ray Toole. Shout out to the latest Ford Trophy digest that I have on our website right now, where I highlighted the best players from Ford Trophy, the best young players, sorry. Christian Clark and Ray Toole are definitely in that mix. But they both average over 15, whereas Adam Milne's got 9 wickets at an average of 9. So Adam Milne is in great form. He seems to get better as he's gotten older. So shout out to Adam Milne. He will be a factor in this series. And then a lot of the batters have been in Blackcaps or out of Ford Trophy. So obviously Latham, Blundell, Will Young, Ravindra, they've all been away with the Blackcaps, and our saviour Henry Nicholls as well. Mark Chapman, I don't think he played yesterday in the Ford Trophy. Funnily enough, you did have Ben Lister and Jimmy Neesham playing Ford Trophy yesterday, even though they were not available for this squad because they are injured. So it's a very convoluted selection scenario for Blackcaps for this squad. Finn Allen has been in nice form for the Ford Trophy as well. So I expect Finn Allen just to come out and smash boundaries and probably be one of the best batters for the Blackcaps, although in this year in ODI cricket, Finn Allen has an average of 17 and a strike rate of 91. So that's kind of purgatory, no man's land for Finn Allen, because he's not having a whack and he's not scoring many runs. So I don't mind if Finn Allen, like everyone's going to analyze stats about Finn Allen and say, oh, he's only averaging 20. That's all right if he's got a strike rate of 130, 120 in ODI cricket. Even if he's got a strike rate of 110 in ODI cricket, that's Finn Allen's role. Like, he's just there to have a whack up top. But if he's got a strike rate of 91 and an average of 17, he's not really doing anything. So it'll be very interesting to see how Finn Allen, obviously he was kind of dropped from the Blackcaps ahead of the World Cup. So it'll be interesting to see how he responds. And then, of course, there's... everyone loves Rachin Ravindra. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, considering his success at the World Cup. Which of those kind of pockets stands out to you as interesting or intriguing, enticing?
Yeah, Rachin Ravindra is going to have a fun time of it, turning back up and all of a sudden finding that he's the fan favorite player in these home games, which, from being a fringe player last time he played in New Zealand to that is going to be something. And I think in a way his reputation's been boosted by not playing those test matches, because everyone's been talking about him because of that, you know. If he just played and averaged 15 like everyone else in that tour, it wouldn't be a conversation.
And like, again, considering how our best batter ever, Kane Williamson, performed in the second test, especially, like the idea that Rachin Ravindra was going to, you know, dominate that series might not have been a certainty. I don't know if Rachin Ravindra is going to be as much a fan favorite here as he was in India. Like, that did seem like a very specific thing to India, with his favoritism and the celebration of Rachin Ravindra. And obviously India drives a lot of the cricket content numbers. So if you're impressing in India, that's where you're going to get a lot of the data and analytics suggesting you're a superstar, because Indians are just like looking you up. So yeah, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, when he shows up as the most viewed players on Cricinfo little bar that they have on the side there, I'm guessing that was the case for a lot of that World Cup. So that's going to be an enticing aspect of this tour. I think because a lot of those, the interesting thing about that is they did play a series in Bangladesh prior to the World Cup, which didn't have the full World Cup squad. So you got some of the guys who were in the sort of um I started watching that documentary thing on the series on Netflix about the US women's football team when they were at the World Cup. First episode's a complete waste of time where they're just talking about how they picked the squad, but they had this idea about bubble players. They keep using the term bubble players of players who are like on the fringe but not necessarily in, the ones who could go either way with squad selections. I think that's kind of where you've got a few of the guys in this squad would fit into that, and also those some of those guys played in Bangladesh against Bangladesh earlier on in the year prior to the World Cup. And I'm thinking Adam Milne's 9 wickets this year, a lot of them would have come in that series against Bangladesh there. And also a fair bit of Finn Allen's not scoring runs in ODIs this year might have also come in that series. There was a couple of, I think it was a 3-game series and one got washed off, but I can't remember if they batted only or bowled only in the first game. But one of those guys would have had 3 innings to do something and whatever. So there's a little bit there. Like I can see how Adam Milne, quick bowler, bowls with a nice, fairly like straight seam, gets a little bit of bounce. Is going to be tricky against the Bangladesh team that always seems, vertically challenged no matter who they pick. There's a lot of short fellas in that team. That's a curious little one to keep an eye on, because I think those guys who are in that kind of bubble realm are the ones who have the most to gain from this series, because there's not a whole lot in terms of the results. They're going to go out there and try and win, sweet as. But yeah, like you say, it's not one to overanalyze or say, so and so continues to not score runs, we've got to drop them. It's like this is not a series that has those kind of ramifications. But obviously, if you play well and improve your stats, it always helps your case to some extent. And there are a few guys in this team who could potentially get themselves a few more ODI looks with some decent performances. So we'll see how that goes. But I still think like it is the debutants I kind of want to see the most, though, if I'm being honest.
Adam Milne only played one of those ODIs against Bangladesh, but he did take 4 wickets. So
okay, so
he's had a nice kind of little phase. He took 3 wickets, 1 wicket, 5 wickets, and 4 wickets going back over his last 4 games. So he's all right. Adam Milne. Finn Allen did play those 3 ODIs. It might have been 5, but I'm just looking at the last 10 games here. His last 3 scores from that ODI series against Bangladesh were 28, 12, and 9. So I'm not sure. Let me pull up Finn Allen's mahi in that series versus Bangladesh. As you said, a pre-World Cup series featuring a lot of the bubble players. And Finn Allen, it was a 3-game series. So he finished with 49 runs and an average of 16, strike rate of 80. So again, that is cricketing purgatory for Finn Allen. I want to see Henry Nicholls score a lot of runs. And I would love to see Henry Nicholls score a lot more runs than Rachin Ravindra. That would be hilarious, considering the last 3 months. Like, that would just be the craziest situation if Henry Nicholls is just a run-scoring monster and Rachin Ravindra struggles to score runs. Like, I don't want to wish bad upon anyone or a lack of form, but it would be hilarious if Henry Nicholls was the star of the show and the apparent star of the show didn't really step up for the series.
Well, yeah, I personally I prefer the opposite, but I think what's funny about that idea is that it could easily happen. Like that's not out of the question at all. That Ravindra might play these games and score like 20 combined runs, and Henry Nicholls could get a 50 and 100 across the series. That's not in any way out of the borders of possibility. So it would be pretty funny just to catch the reaction if that does occur.
Is there a player you are predicting to dominate this series? Who, with bat or ball, who stands out to you as a player who's going to Let's go with best New Zealand player against Bangladesh in the ODIs.
Best player against Bangladesh in the ODIs. You know what I kind of think, and I hope I'm right because it will be the most entertaining of the options, but I've watched a couple of the he's going good, so let's chuck on the Ford Trophy live stream and see how far he can take this thing with, and then catching up on the highlights afterwards for Finn Allen lately. He has scored a couple hundreds, and he's in some decent touch, and he's not necessarily just like going out there and smacking the cover off the ball from ball one either. He's scoring at a quick enough runnable rate, getting himself in, putting the bad ball away, and then as he gets deeper in and tires out the bowlers, then he really takes off. And I've enjoyed that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that translates into some dominance in this series because it's the kind of series where he's kind of poised to do well, isn't it? It's not overseas, it's its home conditions. Against the touring side, that's probably not the best 11 that Bangladesh are going to be able to put out on the field at any thing. Just the nature of it, same as it's not our best team that we're throwing out there. Wouldn't I kind of genuinely think there's a chance that Finn Allen could just go berserk in this one, and I hope so. I think everyone hopes so. It's one of them exciting players that you just want to see do well. But yeah, he did get dropped for a reason from the Blackcaps. Like they gave him a chance to be the opener at the World Cup, and he wasn't able to take it. But yes, I do think these are the kind of conditions that suit him doing big things.
I was talking about Finn Allen, the state of purgatory before. This is peak Finn Allen in the Ford Trophy, 5 games, 387 runs, averages 77, strike rate of 127. So that is peak Finn Allen right there. That's in the domestic one-day competition, whereas ODIs for the Blackcaps, as you said, and as I alluded to earlier, he is in a bit of purgatory. Just for the giggles, I'm going to go with Henry Nicholls. I will remind folks and myself, Finn Allen first for runs in the Ford Trophy. Adam Milne's the best bowler in Ford Trophy. So those are just good things happening. But I do think Henry Nicholls, fantastic cricketer, the best second, third, fourth, fifth, maybe sixth best batter from Aotearoa right now. I don't know. I don't care. He's going to score runs just for the lols. The White Ferns did bounce back against Pakistan. Very impressive win over Pakistan in the first ODI. And I'm in this mental battle that I did write about for our website, thenews-cage.com, where I don't know if this was an outlier performance or if this is White Ferns bouncing back, because there were some signs that it was an outlier performance. I think the fact that a lot of Pakistan were off in that game. They weren't as intense, they weren't as vibrant, they weren't as urgent as they were in the T20s. And they also lost their Anita Dar. She had she got a ball to the face. So I don't know if she's going to be playing the second game. For some reason, there were a few players who got hit in the head by the ball. Obviously, Amelia Kerr as well. So it was just a strange game all round. And whether it was Amelia Kerr taken 3 wickets. That was the first time she's taken 3 wickets in roughly a year of ODI bowling. Suzie Bates scoring runs. First time she's scored runs like a century in ODIs for a year. There's these type of things. Like Bernadine Bezuidenhout, it was her first score over 50 in maybe 14 ODIs. There are a lot of things like that where it's this hasn't been happening, and it hasn't been happening for a long time. Mix that in with the Pakistan, maybe they were they're not hungover, because I don't think many of them drink. I don't think any of them will be drinking, but I do not mean this literally, but maybe there was a hangover from their T20 series victory and they were a bit slow to start. Also, this was in Queenstown, where apparently the White Ferns are legendary in Queenstown. And I will also highlight that the Pakistan, were 110 in the 19th over when they lost their first wicket. So the White Ferns did score 365 thanks to a century from Susie Bates, 80s from Bezoden Hoot and Amelia Kerr. Sophie Devine whacked 70 runs at a strike rate of 194. Like, the White Ferns were utterly dominant, but then Pakistan scored 100 runs in 19 overs before they lost their first wicket. And credit to the White Ferns, they did dismiss Pakistan. Again, that hasn't happened a whole lot for the White Ferns in the past year or so of ODI bowling. So there's a lot of things happening here where I don't know if this was the White Ferns turning a corner, because it could well be. Like, the White Ferns are still playing Pakistan in New Zealand, and they usually win these series. They usually perform as they did in the first ODI. That's what made the T20 series so weird. So that is a realistic possibility, but there are also signs that this was just an outlier performance in an otherwise pool of mediocrity. So I'm not sure where I sit. Obviously, we'll wait for the second game, which I think is Friday afternoon in Christchurch. So the next two games are in Christchurch. And Pakistan seemed to enjoy the Dunedin conditions. They didn't necessarily enjoy the Queenstown conditions, because I think the third T20 that the White Ferns won was also in Queenstown. So the White Ferns won both games in Queenstown. Pakistan won both games in Dunedin. Now we have two games in Christchurch to further set up the series. I don't expect you to have the answers that I'm seeking. I think the second ODI will provide the answers, but do you have any thoughts on my confusion about this White Ferns performance?
I mean, do they play games in the North Island as well, or they just Pakistan come over and they're just like, we're just going to give you the South Island at the start of summer before everything is like heated up. But that seems like maybe there's well, you could say it seems like one of those nice convenience schedules for a touring side from a warmer climate, but they were really good and much better than the White Ferns in Dunedin, which is the further south of those. So I guess it doesn't work.
It's also just like smart scheduling logistically, and
Yeah, well,
apparently they don't, like, the Blackcaps aren't going to be playing a whole lot of cricket down south. I don't think either. Like, I'm not too worried about that. Like, I'm sure Pakistan love the South. I'm pretty sure they are not mad at the scenery of the South Island. Like, let's be honest.
no, particularly that Queenstown ground, which if it didn't have an airport right next to it, would be one of the best in the world. Like, it's so like, it's such a picture, and then you get these airport noises just constantly. Not even just the planes flying in and out. You kept hearing like beeps on like the intercom or something. It's like just stuff. I'm assuming that's from the airport, just bleeding into the into the tele coverage. But you know, it looks a treat. Yeah, it was a weird game in which it's not just that a few things went right. It was like everything that hadn't been happening went right for them, with the exception, as you rightly state, of they. It's not like they took early wickets in the bowling thing. The wickets came down the back end because of scoreboard pressure, and it got to the point where Pakistan had lost, so they were like, "Well, let's have some fun and at least try to score some runs." So I mean, you could say that's a positive as well. You put a score up on the board, and then you bowl to that score. And even though you're not taking wickets, you're restricting the run rate to where the pressure mounts, and then you start taking wickets as they retaliate to that. But it would have been nice to get a couple of like new ball wickets. It's one of those things that they also haven't been doing a lot of lately. Still let an opposition batter get to 100, so that also seems like something that's happened against them a fair bit too often in recent times. But also the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things we could complain about in the past just went great for them in this game, including someone other than the big three scoring runs. Or potentially you could even say big four if you want to slide Matty Green in there on recent form. But however you want to define that, Bernardine Bezodenhout hasn't been part of that group. Not like the top scorer in ODIs was like 35 or something coming into this game. And then she scores 80 odd and probably would have gone on to get 100 if she hadn't busted her toe and then run herself out, you know? That's yeah, it's the exact kind of game where you see, oh well, this is the potential. Like this is what the team's capable of. This is why we've been like, if they were just a bad team losing to better teams over and over, we wouldn't need to critique them, or we wouldn't be picking holes in performances and things like that. It's the fact is they've been playing below what they're capable of, and here we saw what they're capable of, and it's a reminder of that. Like, it's a reminder of why the standards probably um, outside of our coverage need to be a lot higher. It's like I can understand the broadcasters not wanting to like piss on the thing they're trying to sell to you, but it's just they get a I don't know. It's the same thing we've talked about before. There isn't as the stuff doesn't get highlighted elsewhere. But
I was thinking
yeah,
like
go.
I was reminded of how insane the difference between the football Ferns and the White Ferns coverage is, because everyone is very quick to complain about the football Ferns when the White Ferns are like blatantly worse in the context of their sporting endeavors. And I was also curious, like it's a tough position for Frances Mackay to be in, but she is genuinely one of the best cricketers in Aotearoa right now. She is still performing at a high level in HBJ Shield. If she's playing Super Smash, she's going to be good in the Super Smash. She is Canterbury's best player. She does crazy things on the cricket field every game. But she's not good enough to be in the White Ferns, and she's commentating the White Ferns. It's quite a weird position to be in. It'll be like if who's another very good, like if Natalie Dodd from CD was like commentating, or if you had Jess McFadden and Rebecca Burns and those players from Wellington commentating. So Frances Mackay is genuinely first 11 quality for women's cricketers in New Zealand. She should be in the White Ferns. If she wanted to be in the White Ferns, I think she'd make a real push to be in the White Ferns. But she's commentating, so she's chilling, and you can't expect the commentators to say anything negative because that's kind of their job at this point. But I am constantly reminded of how insane the difference between football Ferns perceptions and White Ferns perception / criticism is, because the football Ferns are always playing teams who are better than them, and yeah, they don't win, they don't score many goals. The White Ferns are always underperforming, they're always underwhelming, they always kind of shit the bed. But everyone's complaining about the football Ferns. People don't complain about the White Ferns. It's very strange.
Especially because a lot of the complaints you could just go through and like transcribe it all into a Word document and then do that thing where you do the copy replace thing. Just swap out football Ferns for White Ferns, and the complaints would be true. Like a lot of the things that are complained about are things that are actually true on the other side, and then not so much for the Ferns. Like it's not to let the football Ferns off the hook, because there's plenty of things they can improve on, and there's certainly need to find better answers for the creativity and goal scoring stuff. But also, like, there is context at play here, and they are often playing teams that are, if not ranked higher than them, then better than them. Because I think if you're just going by the FIFA rankings, people would understand the FIFA rankings are terrible. They're not, first of all, any kind of ranking is not an indicator of what's going to happen in the next game. It's just kind of a summation of what happened in previous games. You don't play the game on paper, as the saying goes. But also the FIFA rankings are a particularly bad one. Like the All Whites are always sitting around 100 to 120 range, and they're better than that. Football Ferns are always sitting around the 20 to 25 range. They're not as good as that. It's a weird one where we benefit from it in one hand and don't from it on the other side. But yeah, a lot of those criticisms of the football Ferns, I think, actually would apply more relevantly to the White Ferns, which is why it's weird. But it's also an example of why the White Ferns should be like, the football Ferns aren't going to be making knockout stuffs of World Cups regularly. The White Ferns, even accounting for how many fewer countries play cricket, they should be a semi-finalist every time. Like the talent that they have, the sort of pedigree that they have, the structures in place. Although maybe those structures aren't quite performing as they ought to be, but at least there's it's there. they should be a top four team any format really. We're only talking about either format here because I don't think they played a test match for about 20 years. But it just yeah, it's such a weird dynamic, eh? It's such a strange dynamic about how it's almost pick and choose where you want to complain about things, which maybe I don't know, maybe reflects more on the state of our media and fans than it does on the teams themselves. Come to think of it.
Speaking of football, the Phoenix, the women, are playing in Adelaide on Saturday night. The men are playing against Macarthur FC on Monday. So we might be previewing the men's game on Monday if we're recording our niche cast on Monday, as we have been doing recently. So I'm not sure how you want to split that up, but we do have Wellington Phoenix women taking on Adelaide United. Let me do my mandatory ladder check. And Adelaide United, they're bottom of the table. They haven't won a game yet. They have 2 draws and 5 losses. They've scored 9 goals. Wellington Phoenix women of the New Zealand football women teams cannot score goals. They've got 12 goals and they win games. So hopefully that's an easy dub for the Wellington Phoenix women. And if we go to the Wellington Phoenix men, they're facing Macarthur FC. Macarthur FC are first on the ladder. So that will be a tremendous matchup that will tell us a lot about the Wellington Phoenix men. You did tease your Wellington Phoenix men deep dive, and we do have that Monday situation. So let's put the spotlight on the woman just for a moment. What did you think about coming away from our Monday podcast, where we did highlight a lot of the intricacies of Wellington Phoenix women's football, specifically McMeekin at left back, her razzle-dazzle footy, her athleticism, and how the interchangeable nature of some of the Wellington Phoenix women and how they position. I think what we figured out was that in some cases it works really well, in other cases it doesn't work so well. I think the stuff that works well is more defensive, where you said and you highlighted this on Twitter as well, with the inverted nature of how McMeekin can play, where she's coming into midfield, other players go out wider. But I think whether it's McMeekin and her role there, you've got Kate Taylor moving between defensive midfield and centre back. Even Annalie Longo, her versatility, I don't think it was on display necessarily, because as you said,
a little bit, because she did play as the more defensive midfielder in the free.
But that's my point. I think that might have generated some more of the attacking opportunities for their opponent in that game. So her versatility was on display in the fact that she played both positions, but I don't think she
kind of played the same way there as she would have further forward.
Well, it's just the consistency of always having that one body in front of the centre back. So I don't think that was there, because there was a lot of space in behind the Phoenix in that game. But I think those interchangeable, versatile players in the midfield skewing towards the defense, it worked out a lot better than the players up top, where you had Speckmeyer and Hope Breslin changing roles between midfield and attack, so striker. All of which sounds a lot like the Warriors. We've drawn similarities between the Wellington Phoenix men and the Warriors, with the invigorated coaching, refresh style and depth and local players and all that stuff, and just the fun we have watching those two teams. The Warriors are full of versatile players, and it's a element of their team and squad and roster that I think is overlooked a lot. We've talked about Ali Leotawa. He plays every single position. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's apparently going to be a centre. Warriors have 4 or 5 centres who could be starting, and some of them could be wingers. But then you've got Mitchell Barnett, you've got Marata Nekore, you've got Dimitrik Sifakula, you've got all those players who play edge, they play middle. Dylan Walker, small forward, who can play in the halves, he can play hooker. Like there's a lot of versatility there that I think is very useful mid-game, but it also just is useful to have a squad full of players who can do a job in different positions. Seems like the Wellington Phoenix have a bit of that as well. I don't know if it's like I don't think this is like a shining element of the Warriors either, because those players do have their best positions. They are weaker in other positions and so on. And I think that's the same for the Wellington Phoenix again, because like, as you said on Monday, Hope Breslin, her mahi in the midfield isn't going to be as good as a midfielder in the midfield knowing how to play that role, but she did it. And she offers a body. She offers a presence in that role. And there are those Wellington Phoenix women's players who can cover multiple positions to a decent level. And there's like what I'm talking my way to is there's a fluidity to everything. Their small ball style is incredibly fluid because they all move into space. They all quickly pass into space. Their ball movement is fluid. The way the players move between positions is fluid, and the roles players like move between positions without losing their actual role. Like they have their role, but as we see with McMeekin, she can go from this position on the field to another position on the field, whereas there's also fluidity in roles. Like you can be given this role and another, and then next game you're playing a different role. I think fluidity is the key word of Wellington Phoenix women's football right now. How about that? Works my way around to it.
Yeah, I do think the women's team are a lot more fluid than the men's team. Although, like, you get because Italiano's played the same base formation in every game, and he's picked. I think there's 9 players who have started all 7 matches so far. So there's a lot of consistency there. But then within that, he's talked about how he has like a bunch of sort of I don't know exactly know how to define this. That doesn't sound like coach speak, but like he has formations within the formations where I guess it's just different looks and different side of the field. If this guy's got the ball, then you need to be here rather than there. Like you don't just stand in the same shape. Everyone's exactly the same distance apart the entire game, moving up and down just like that. You shrink and expand and all these kind of things. So he's talked about having sort of, yeah, like I guess, I don't know, sub formations, this kind of thing, like which situations is Tim Payne supposed to go forward in? When he does, what's Barbaroussa supposed to do? Is he stay wide? Does he go in? That kind of stuff. I think is probably what he's talking about. But the women's team, definitely, because you got, I think, a smaller squad there. It was a smaller squad to begin with because you had 22 players. They added a 23rd with an amateur goalkeeper just to make sure they have 3 goalies in the squad, who's just a player from the reserves, Amy Daniele. And since then, they've added 1 more. They've filled in another import, but they've lost 2 players to season-ending injuries. Another one's, left the squad. There's one of their scholarship players is still coming back from an ACL herself. I know Elongo probably isn't at 100% fitness yet. I don't think she's played 90 minutes. She's gotten back to starting, but she's still building up her capacity. So, let alone last week, you had a bunch of football Ferns players coming back on sort of short turnaround, fly back in on like Friday, play on Sunday, I think it was. So there's trickiness there, and with a small squad, you have to have players who can play in multiple positions. Like you have to be able to be fluid like that, and it does go beyond that because you point out the style is also quite fluid. Like it's not just what players can do; it's also how they play on the pitch. So I think I think it is a bit. It is more than what we've seen from them in the past. Definitely, it's something that has kind of been part of the evolution this season, and it's fun. Like you need sort of smart, technical, talented players to be able to do that kind of stuff. They seem to have that, and their results speak for themselves. You know, they're significantly better. I think they haven't matched last season's points total already. Then they'll hopefully do it this week against Adelaide because Yeah, Adelaide haven't been up to much, and that's been disappointing because I followed them quite closely because they do have Hannah Blake, who and also Rosetta Taylor, who I've mentioned them both before, but Kiwi players. Rosetta Taylor's a dual international, but she was close to the under-20 scene a few years ago. So hopefully she's someone who might be on the Ferns picture. But Hannah Blake absolutely would have been on the Ferns last tour, but she picked up a little injury, I think it was, and missed one game for Adelaide, but came back last week. They've not been great, but they do have a couple Kiwi attackers, so it would be nice if they scored some more goals. Maybe the Phoenix have to help them out there just for the greater good. But yeah, there is a lot of fluidity in that team, and it'll be very interesting to see how they kind of reconcile last week, which was a bit of a makeshift team in a few different ways because of the lack of options, just for a variety of reasons, and what they do this week when those Ferns players have had a bit more time to rest and recover and should be back to full availability. And you've got the last import, Isabel Cox, should be arriving, probably not to start, but hopefully she might be there in time to play some part off the bench. Maybe might have to wait another week. We'll see how that goes. But I would imagine Kate Taylor moves back into that CDM role where she's been real good so far. And she'll do that because Mackenzie Barry will be ready to start and play probably 90 minutes at centre back again, alongside Rebecca Lake, who I don't think you really lose much from having her instead of Vandermeer, except for in depth. Because if Taylor's playing CDM, those two are starting, Vandermeer's out. I don't know who your other centre backs are. Like, I don't know who else is going to play there unless you slide a fullback over, maybe. Michaela Foster could probably do a job for 20 minutes off the bench if someone gets injured or something like that, or isn't ready for 90 minutes if there's some situation along those lines. I wouldn't be surprised if you see reserve team captain Ella McMillan sneaking onto the bench. She was part of the wider squad for last game. She can play midfield or centre back, so she's also a versatile player. Saw her play multiple games in both those positions during the National League. Is a very young player, but also not that much younger than Mania Elliott or some of the others around the first team fringes. So we'll see how that goes. It will be very interesting to see the team lineup that Paul Temple comes up with, because I think he got a lot of new information from that Melbourne victory game. There are a lot of things where it's like, okay, maybe Hope Breslin isn't a midfielder, but I don't know. Alyssa Wynnum had some sharp moments off the bench. That's something that maybe she continues to make match day squads and get little cameos late in games to continue to do that kind of thing. There's Zoe McMeekin certainly did her absolute best to continue to get opportunities. So we'll see what that looks like, because there is that peskiness about only having a short bench, which it makes absolutely no sense. Paul Temple's mentioned this a couple of times about like why is the A-League women's you only get 5 players on the bench, one of them has to be a goalkeeper, and in the men's you get like 7 players, I think it is, on the bench. One still has to be a goalkeeper, but it means you at least have options. It's not just you can only use the subs you've got there. You're always going to have at least an unused sub or two in the men's side. You can sneak more players on the bench and you can make decisions. Do I put this person on or this person? Whereas the other one is just like, do I sub the women's team? Do I sub this player on or do I not sub this player on because she's the only one left on the bench, kind of thing? I don't quite understand why that's the case, but I'm sure that'll change at some point. It's just another example of a way in which players need to be versatile and fluid, and I think that's something they clearly must have targeted that this year. Like there must have been an aim to say we need to be more versatile, more fluid, and it's working for them so far. And we'll see how it goes against Adelaide.
Who is Katie Kitching? So I've seen you put up a clip of her goal scoring for Sunderland, and then I saw she was in the football Ferns, but she seems to be born and raised in England, to the best of my knowledge. So we'll do a couple of Flying Kiwis, and then we'll go a couple more in the subscriber podcast as we finish up here. But let's start with Katie Kitching, because she's just another solid footballer from England who's chosen to represent Aotearoa. That's another positive sign for what the football ferns and all whites are building, because there's a lot of these players with dual international eligibility who are choosing to represent Aotearoa.
Yeah, and she's one of them. Katie Kitching, she's a player who I would never have known to. I don't know if I would have heard of her or not. I certainly is not someone I recalled or had name recognition for. I'm sure I've seen her name on team sheets because she actually was a teammate of Grace Neville last year at London City Lionesses, which is an interesting thing because she's another English-born player who's decided to represent New Zealand instead, thanks to cheeky bit of parentage. I think with Katie Kitching, her mother was born in New Zealand, which is why she's eligible. I think she spent a little bit of time, so completely born and raised in England, spent a little bit of time with the Manchester City Academy, but then went and played 5 full years of university stuff in the United States. Came back after that and played I think played a year with London City, where she was a teammate with Grace Neville, and didn't really play a lot. I mean, she played most games, but she played as a sub most games. She wasn't like a starter or a key player or anything. Then she moved to Sunderland, probably to get more game time, and has been an absolute key player for them. She's been playing, she can play as a deeper midfielder, she can play as an attacking midfielder, she can score goals, she can set goals up, she can win tackles, she works hard. Saw her not a lot of that for the football ferns in the first game against Colombia, where she got a debut just very late on, sort of subbed on near the end of the game. But in the second game, Malia Steinmetz only played 20 minutes for some reason. Still don't know why that was. She just got subbed off randomly. She didn't go down injured or anything. She just randomly got subbed off after 20 minutes. And on comes Kitching, who said later on that it was a bit of a surprise. So it wasn't a planned thing. It wasn't like, well, we've told her club we'll only give her this amount of minutes or whatever. Or if they did, they didn't tell Kitching. She found out as a surprise. But I think probably with Steinmetz, maybe it was just a matter of struggling with the altitude or something like that on the short turnaround. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And so she's maybe just a bit short of breath. We'll sub her off and not do anything silly, because she then went back to North Zealand and Denmark and played 90 minutes and played a hard working 90 minutes, making a lot of tackles as well. And a nil draw, unfortunately for them. But the Denmark stuff was cool this week because HB Koj also had Claudia Bunge returning from injury. Daisy Cleverley got only her 3rd league start of the season, and I think 13 rounds, I think it's been. And Ellie Green backed up for AGF as well. So you had all 4 New Zealanders in the Kvinderliga getting starts. It's only the second week this season that's happened. So that was cool. None of them lost either. In fact, I think all of them kept clean sheets, but 2 of them had nil or draws. So unfortunately, 3 of them, because 2 of them play for the same team. Katie Kitching, out of the blue, call up for the football ferns, but looked pretty tidy in that second game. Did the kind of things that the scouting from Sunderland writers and reporters suggested that she would, which is all that, the hard work in midfield, Mahi, that I mentioned before. So yeah, and then went back to Sunderland in a cup game against a team from a couple divisions below them. So it was a game they were expected to win, and they did win. They won 7-0. She scored 2 goals. So, carrying on nicely. She's a couple goals straight after making an international debut. It's been a nice couple of weeks for her.
And what is she, like a holding midfielder? Is she an attacking midfielder? What's her role for Sunderland? What's her role for the football ferns? Because by the looks of her, she seems more like an attacking midfielder, and there's a growing crop of attacking midfielders. Obviously, the Phoenix have Macy
Fraser.
I did need to confirm that. Macy
You're
Fraser.
getting your MFs confused.
Yeah. Bloody MFer.
So to speak.
Fraser, I think the chaotic nature of that Melbourne victory game didn't help her. They also highlighted in the commentary she was closely marked, and they also highlighted the transition footy. Didn't really see her get on the ball and do her razzle-dazzle footy, but I imagine Katie Kitching is she's a younger player. So if
she'd be older than Macy Fraser, though. She'd be mid-20s probably, because she's done a full thing of she's younger than Rhea Percival and Annalie Longo, though. To the other midfielders she's competing with.
But it does seem like there is a bit of an enterprising attacking midfielder boom. Maybe not a boom, but does Katie Kitching fill that stuff? I don't know, lack of words there.
Yeah, I mean, having like three players who can do that role would count as a boom for the football Ferns. They've normally only got one or two, and have to ask them to play wing or up front or whatever. Like, I think of Olivia Chance spending most of the last couple of years having to play as a left winger because we didn't really have another left-footed player who could cross from those positions. I think we're past that now, just because of I think Indy Riley and Jackie Hand have given us some good wing options, and hopefully when Olivia Chance is back, she can play more as a central midfielder, where I think she's a little bit more effective. If they're playing a 4-4-2 formation, there isn't really a spot for a specific attacking midfielder, though. So you sort of have to be able to do both of those things. Then if you've got Malia Steinmetz there, she's going to be the more defensive one. And then you can have someone else who can maybe hang forward a little bit more, kind of like how Betsy Hassett played in these recent games. Then again, top choice duo might well be Steinmetz and Percival, which we saw in, for example, in the Norway game against the Norway game at the World Cup, where it's just you got two hard workers who are going to press high and win turnovers, and then just try to get the ball forward quickly. And I think Katie Kitching can do that kind of stuff. So I think she fits in nicely. She's not necessarily a player that we don't have someone like. If we could have found someone who's a goal scoring striker, that would have been our best case of a dual international. But she certainly doesn't detract from the group. She's in there, competitive, can challenge for minutes alongside a lot of these other midfielders that we have. So a good find.
We will keep chatting about some flying Kiwis, Aotearoa's best footballers around the world, and we'll also break down a lot of domestic cricket in our subscriber podcast. So if you are a member of the Patreon whānau, or you do have a paid Substack subscription, make sure you check out the subscriber podcast. And if you want to support the Niche Cage, Patreon and Substack are great avenues to do so. Otherwise, thank you for being here with us, and pick up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.